Hello and welcome back. Now we are going to be starting class or lecture number 4, in which we will continue looking at some aspects of project stakeholder management and engagement, specifically as they relate to other scientific disciplines. So when you're talking about project stakeholder management and engagement, you have to realize that it is a very complex subject. I've already pointed that out to you. I have indicated it quite clearly. And what I would like to do in this class is I would like to demonstrate the interfacing relationships which exist between project stakeholder management and engagement and these various disciplines which are shown over here on this slide. As you can see, there are a large number of disciplines which closely interface with this subject area, as they are given over here. For example, communications, which we looked at in the preceding lecture, culture, development studies, economics, ethics, information technology, international relations, goes back to what I said about countries and projects and stakeholders, law, management, politics and public policy, psychology, public administration, planning, and sociology. There are other disciplines also, but I thought these were more relevant, and I will be briefly demonstrating what kind of interfacing takes place between project stakeholder management and engagement and these disciplines. So we have to see stakeholder management as an interdisciplinary subject which is very closely embedded in many different subject areas. Starting with communications and project stakeholder management. Now, in the preceding class I already indicated to you how much overlapping is taking place between these two disciplines, these two areas, and I told you that communications management is at the heart or at the core of stakeholder management. Why is this the case? Well, already, as I had hinted, communications plays a fundamental role in managing and engaging all stakeholder entities. You have to interact with stakeholders. You have to convince them, for instance. You have to talk to them. You have to listen to them, to hear what they have to say. What is their point of view? What apprehensions or what concerns or what expectations or what hopes have they got? All this takes place through the medium of communications. And every stakeholder management and engagement strategy on every project starts off with communications. Of course, the content of the strategies can also have a lot of other things, material incentives, for instance, or financial incentives, but all this has to be communicated with stakeholders. You cannot interact without some form of communication between stakeholders. And as I pointed out earlier, communicational deficiencies have been acknowledged as being a key determining factor in project failures. So this is something really you will have to keep in mind. Communications also, as I pointed out, it's very versatile, it's very diverse. It's a lot of different things come under communications, has many forms, speaking, as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm communicating with you, writing, reading, listening. You are listening to me. I can't interact with you directly because given the nature of this virtual environment, but you will be listening to this lecture. You'll be hopefully understanding what I have to say to you. Body language also, as you can see in this picture over here, ex-President Bush, his body language, how he's listening very attentively. And communication uses many different mediums, which you'll find on projects: briefings, discussions, conversations, presentations, use of paper, use of technology, as we are using at the moment. There is no universal best approach for communicating with project stakeholders. It depends on the context. Of course, if you are having a project which involves outsourcing, for instance, much of the communication will take place online. through email, through software, and through conferencing, video conferencing, Skype, and so forth. On the other hand, if you are doing a project which is somewhere in a rural area, in Punjab, in Sindh, or somewhere, much of the conversation will take place on site verbally between people in the spoken form, maybe not so much in the written form, and maybe very little, if at all, online. So one has to see the context. What is the best way for communicating? Communication is a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. In other words, the whole purpose of communication is to convey information, to get ideas across, to convey apprehensions or expectations or ideas, information, things like that. That is the whole purpose of communication, and the more effectively it can do that with regards to your project, achieving your project, then the better it is. Much can be said about communication, and that is a whole subject area in itself. You know, there's a whole course module, project communication management. This is what I taught also in Maryland last year to my 69 undergraduate students. Some project management programs, they have a whole course module on communication management, but I want to go now and look at some other areas, because otherwise we'll not be able to complete this course. There's so much to convey to you people. If you now look at another discipline, culture and project stakeholder management, you will recall from the preceding lectures that I had mentioned culture on various occasions. Specifically organizational culture, how important it is to have a good organizational culture, or a supportive organizational culture, which is good for good stakeholder management and engagement. There's also culture of people, different countries, different continents, different regions, and so forth. They also have got a different culture, and culture can have a very strong impact on the way people entities interact with each other, and also the way they communicate with each other. If you go to a definition of culture, it's actually quite difficult to define, but it's easier to perceive. You know, you can see different cultures, you can see it, you can feel it, but a bit more difficult to define. Basically, you can look at culture. It's a set of distinguishing values, norms, ideals, beliefs and attitudes, conventions and traditions which are shared collectively by a group of entities, people, and which are transmitted and developed by them over time. If you want to sum it up in a very simple one-sentence way, you could say culture is the way we do things around here. This is our approach, this is our way of life, this is our way of doing things. And the culture, of course, can deviate, it can diverge quite considerably between places, between people. Even in the same place, you know, you can have many different cultures which are coexisting with each other. As I pointed out, it's not only people culture or national culture, but it's also organizational culture, and even organizations. Within the organizations, there are different sections, there are different departments, different divisions which can have their own specific culture. A lot of research has been done on the subject of culture. One person in particular is a Dutchman by the name of Gerhard Hofstadter. He's quite aged now, a Dutch sociologist, and he has extensively researched national and organizational cultures, both. And he has discovered 6 dimensions of culture. Now, going into this in itself is, a subject which will take quite some time to go through. He has done a worldwide survey. It's quite a comprehensive survey, which of course also has been subject to some scientific criticism. But he has come up with various dimensions and variables in order to describe or to define culture. Different places, there are different ways of doing things. In some cultures, entities or people, they tend to be more interactive, more open to each other, more communicative. There is a less hierarchical gap It's a more informal type sort of relationship or interactional relationship. In other places, it's a more formalistic, a more hierarchical approach, a more sort of top-down approach to doing things. We don't want to get involved in all that, but of course, this does have implications for stakeholder management. The way you interact with your stakeholders, for instance, whether you would like to interact with them closely, continuously, directly, or whether you would rather not interact with them closely, continuously, directly, but you would like to do it more indirectly and a more sort of periodic or occasional time frame. All these are cultural sort of considerations which do have an impact on how stakeholder management is being undertaken. If you look at different categories of culture, you'll see, for instance, at the highest level you have national cultures, the culture of the nation. You have got subnational cultures, cultures of the provinces or the states or districts or whatever you call them. You have got organizational cultures, the culture of a major public sector organization like, for example, WAPTA, or a private sector organization or a non-governmental organization. And within the organization, you have got subcultures. Traditionally, for example, in business administration, finance departments, they tend to have a more conservative culture, while other departments like marketing, they have maybe a less conservative culture, and that also affects the way they interact with each other on a day-to-day routine basis, and also in terms of project and programs which they may be jointly, collaboratively undertaking. Besides organizational cultures and sub-organizational cultures, there are also individual cultures. They're group culture, the culture of a group of people, for instance, or the culture of a particular individual. The way I do things, or what I consider to be my way of doing things, or my culture, might be quite different from yours, for instance, even though we are two individuals, might be living in the same country, the same city even, maybe. At the project level, you also have got project cultures, and you have got sub-project cultures. Different entities may be interacting with each other differently than other entities within the same project. This is also possible. So that is why when you talk about culture, you have to be a bit more differentiating. You can't just say, okay, this is this culture, and this is this culture, and this is how they will act, and this is how they will act. That is a little bit too simplistic. You have to look at things in a little bit more detail, a little bit more microscopically. Often, students come to me and they say, we want to do a research project, and we want to examine how, for instance, the culture in Pakistan is affecting commercial organizations, and compare it to how the culture in another country is affecting their commercial organizations, all kinds of things like that. And they have a very generalistic, a very simplistic approach, where they take the national culture and then they apply it at the organizational level, which is not necessarily the right way of going about things. As an example, I have been dealing with some foreign organizations here from supposedly very open foreign cultures. I have found these organizations operating here to be extremely closed and extremely, what should I say, uncooperative. At the same time, I have worked with some Pakistani organizations, and many who come, they say, well, it's a very politicized, a very sort of closed culture, but I have found them to be very open, even though they are local organizations working here in the local context. So please don't treat culture as something which is very simplistic and which you can easily generalize, because you can't. And that is why when you are looking at making stakeholder management and engagement strategies, then you have to be very careful how you actually assess the cultural dimension of your stakeholders. What are some of the cultural influences which are sort of affecting information and communication, or which are related to information communication? The spoken, the written language, appearance, body language and tones, potential for misinterpretation of communication, information processing patterns, willingness of stakeholders to share information. This is a very important aspect, the willingness to share information. Information is the lifeblood of a project also, information communication. And unless there is this willingness to share information, then it becomes sometimes very difficult to properly manage your project. So it's very essential that among all the stakeholders who are there, especially among the primary stakeholders who will be working together legally, contractually, that there is this open communication and information sharing culture. Directness, straightforwardness. There are some stakeholders who tend to be more straightforward, more direct. They will tell you what they think, they'll tell you what they feel, and they also expect you to be straightforward, direct. And there are others who are more sort of, like to skirt the surface and, sort of hum-ha, beat around the bush, as they say in English, and touch subjects in that manner. Communicating acceptance and rejection. Culturally, again, there are big differences. In some cultures, it's considered very rude to say, no, I won't do it, or I can't do it. They sometimes will say, well, not yes, which is more or less the same thing, but they feel culturally that it's a more acceptable way of communicating rejection, for example. Negotiating styles, signaling consensus, willingness or agreement. Again, there are cultural differences which can affect the way these things are done. Attitude and behavior. Well, culture also has a very significant impact on attitude and behavior in terms of, for example, biases and prejudices, religious, racial, ethnic, status, gender-related. In some cultures, for instance, men might not like to work together with women very closely. In other cultures, it is encouraged, as a sort of a basic human right and the way things should be done. Trust and relationships. Building trust, building relationships is generally never easy, no matter where you are, but in some places it can be more difficult than others, and the way you go about it is more different. The level of formalism, hierarchy, protocols, some cultures can be very hierarchical, a lot of protocols to be followed, a lot of procedures, a lot of things which have to be done, while others are more sort of informal and less emphasis on the hierarchy. Sensitivity, of course, is culturally very different. Psyche, individual versus group orientation. This is very important from a stakeholder management perspective. Team working, group orientation, very important. Nowadays, there's not too much place for individualism, particularly not on projects. Again, there are some societies, some cultures which are very individualistic in their outlook, and there are others which are more group-oriented. Often the example of Europe and the US is given as very individualistic, and Japan and some Asian cultures are given as more group-oriented. Of course, you have got a lot of, you could say it's not always the case, but this culturally, this is how it has been sort of defined. Approach to work, you might have heard of the term workaholics, where you really give your heart and soul, body, everything up to the work, and you really don't want to even take a rest until you have finished your work, while others have a more sort of lax, easygoing approach to doing work. Again, this is also related to different cultures. Different cultures have evolved different work approaches, generally speaking. One could go on and on and on. These are all things which have to be taken into consideration. The example here of business and social etiquette, how stakeholders observe business and social etiquette, what are taboo topics, how you perceive time, how important is time for you, are you punctual, you're not punctual, How much proximity do you keep between people? Do you stand very close to each other, or do you, keep a distance, an arm's length distance? Rituals, customs, humor, etc. These are all very culture specific, and they can have an impact on the way stakeholders interact with each other. If one stakeholder, for instance, feels that certain issues have been brought up which should not have been brought up, which should not have been discussed, or they have been discussed at the wrong time, that can affect the level of cooperation, communication from that stakeholder. So one has to be cognizant that different cultures have got different etiquettes, business and social etiquettes, which should be carefully studied. And there are so many examples in the history of management. All kinds of embarrassing situations have arisen because people from different cultures, business people, project employees from different cultures, they were not aware of various etiquettes of other cultures, and when they were working together, there were certain problems resulting from that. Anyway, that's all I want to say about culture. In itself, it's a huge subject area in which you can say so much about. The thing is that culture is important, and when you are talking about stakeholder management, you have to be cognizant of this cultural dimension. As I pointed out, don't generalize, don't put everyone in different cultural baskets, but try and look at them more individually and see how they react, how you expect them to react given their sort of cultural milieu. Now I would like to look at the interfacing between project stakeholder management and information technology, ICT. There are a lot of interfacing points which are taking place between these two disciplines, particularly now, since we are in the information age, the digital age, computer age, the last 20-25 years where information technology has really picked up. All this has had big ramifications also for the way in which stakeholders are managed and engaged. ICT, information communication technology, plays a crucial role in managing and engaging project stakeholders, and actually it's a two-edged sword. With the advent of the digital age, rapid technological advances and increased complexity of project environments, its importance has drastically increased. If you take the example of outsourcing, for instance, where you have got teams of people from different continents working across different time zones, all this has been greatly facilitated by the use of information communication technology. 20-25 years ago may not have been possible. Now it's all very possible. Information technology is a vast field. It includes so many things, the hardware and the software and the networking and the infrastructure and everything which goes with it. Information technology, as I pointed out just now, it's a two-edged sword, meaning it can be used both in favor of projects as well as against projects, depending on who is using that technology. And that is why one has to be very careful with ICT. Technology also has its limitations, even today, which project planners and implementers have to be cognizant of. If you look at application areas of information technology in projects, well, there are many different application areas. For example, modeling. If you want to model a building or a factory or a bridge or some product or something, well, nowadays you have got the technology which can do that for you, all kinds of specialized software programs which can be used by project planners and project designers in order to undertake their projects. Visualization. This is also possible now with information technology, where you can actually make a model of some facility or some building, and you can actually visualize it, from different angles, from top, from bottom, doing walkthroughs, that sort of things. Simulation, of course, is possible. For example, usage levels of resources, and you would like to see what are the outputs of that, the outcomes. You can use simulation methods. Optimization methods. I talked about project portfolios in the preceding class, and you can have a very large number of projects in your portfolio, and of course you would need some tools to help manage those portfolios, to optimize them, so that you don't have a portfolio of projects for which after some time you have no resources, or which the risks are too high. For that you have got various tools, optimization tools, which can assist you in making up a good project portfolio, and this is where technology also comes in. Charts and illustrations such as Gantt charts, which you should be all familiar with if you're studying project management. This can of course be done manually, but the better way now is to use technology like MS Project, Primavera, and the many other project management software programs which are there, some of them which have specialized in this field. Technology can be used by stakeholders for data storage, vast amounts of data, for analysis, for data mining, warehousing, for communication, virtual communication, what we are doing here, virtual university, for collaboration, as I pointed out, such as outsourcing, supply chain management, even for simple presentations using PowerPoint. 20 years ago, you would have been using something else. You would have been using maybe a projector and some little plastic sheet in which you would have written something. It would have been projected on the wall. I remember many years ago when I was a student, we didn't have these nice PowerPoints, and we're sitting in the lecture hall, and at that time the professor used to have a projector in front of him, used to have some plastic, used to write on the plastic. It used to be shown on the whole wall, and now you have all these nice special effects and nice colors and nice designs and so forth, thanks to information technology. So this is one way in which stakeholders can really sort of interface with the area of information technology in order to help them to facilitate their projects. But of course, as I said, it's a two-edged sword. It can also be used, information technology can also be used against projects. And this is happening quite a lot these days. For example, if people are opposed to projects, if you have some stakeholders which are vehemently opposed to projects, big mega projects, construction projects, dam projects, highway projects, airport projects, etc., they too can use information technology to their benefit against the project. And they do that. How do they do that? Well, for example, the medium of communication. They can communicate with each other through IT. They can, for instance, put up websites against the project. And if you look on the internet, you'll find that there are many, many websites which have been set up specifically to oppose different projects which are being undertaken around the world. They can put up videos of possible negative effects which are occurring as a result of projects. You often find them on YouTube and on other places. So, and these are accessible all over the world to anyone who has access to the internet, for instance. So there is also, stakeholders can also use this technology against the project. In many ways they have been quite successful, and technology really has helped them combat various projects. I'd now like to come to another field here, the interfacing which takes place between project stakeholder management and international relations. This is something which is very, very rarely discussed in the context of project management. It's very interesting, actually. We have a very large number of countries in the world, about 200 or so, the last I heard. Not always up to date on these things, but anyway. And the way they can impact on projects and stakeholder relations is quite interesting. As you can see from these pictures here, on the left side of this slide, the nuclear power station at Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union, which actually exploded on the 26th of April 1986, sending a radioactive cloud over a very vast area. especially this area and the surrounding here in Ukraine. I think it's now based in the Ukraine. Well, this originally started as a project, of course. Building a nuclear power station is a project. This now was in operation, so it was the post-project phase. But the result of this catastrophe which occurred at this site has had negative consequences which transcend national borders. So this is an example of, how projects can interface with international relations from a stakeholder perspective, because of course it's the stakeholders who will be incurring or experiencing the negative aspects of the radioactive fallout. There are, of course, many other examples relating to international relations. If you look here in the context of Pakistan, for instance, the construction of the Iran to Pakistan pipeline, which has been under discussion now for a long time, and a lot of ham-hawing on the part of the Pakistan government. You have here again a project, a pipeline, which transcends two national borders, Iran and Pakistan, possibly may transcend a third, that is from Pakistan to India. And you have stakeholders who support this project, inside and outside Pakistan, and also Iran. And you have got stakeholders who oppose the project. For example, the US, which is a very powerful stakeholder in this regard. So you see, international relations and projects and stakeholders, they do converge at points. And there are many other examples which are taking place, like in the South China Sea, various disputes between various countries over there, islands, exploration, which is project work, drilling exploration, and so forth. The law and project stakeholder management, this is again a very important area for projects and for consequently also for stakeholders, because much of the project work is undertaken on the basis of contracts. And contracts, it comes under law, contract law. And there are many other laws also which have an impact on projects and on their stakeholders. Law, of course, is universal. You have laws everywhere, except in some places, Laws are complex, diverse, and adaptive. They change according to time. They regulate how we live, work, and interact with each other. And of course, if they are unheeded or unobserved by stakeholders, they may have negative impact on projects, which can also endanger their existence. And there have been many cases where stakeholders have gone to court and have been granted stay orders of the projects because various laws either were not obeyed or there were some things going on which should not have been going on in a legalistic perspective. Projects have a highly complex regulatory framework. There are a lot of laws which apply to projects. These can be at the transnational level, they can be at the national level, for example the contract law. They can be at the provincial or state, district, municipal, local levels. Laws exist at many different levels, and the projects, they have to see how they interface with different laws at different levels. Contract law is most important, and some project management degree programs, they have a whole module specifically on contract law. There was one which I attended as a guest in Maryland last year also. Contract law offers stakeholders protection, that is legal enforceability of agreements. When you make contracts, they have to be observed. But at the same time, it also poses threats for stakeholders. For example, non-compliance of contracts, breach of contractual obligations. So one has to be very careful. On the one hand, you get protection by your contract, but on the other hand, if you violate the contract intentionally or unintentionally, there are also consequences. So therefore, for stakeholders, contracts present opportunities, but they also impose constraints. What type of contracts do you have on a project? Well, you have, for instance, the consultants. They are tied to the project by a contract. You have the contractors who are doing the physical work. They have got a contract. You have the subcontractors who have contracts. You have the suppliers, vendors who have contracts. You have the project employees who have a contractual obligation. You have the clients who have a contractual commitment, and so forth. So it's a very complex system of contracts which you find on projects. And of course, behind all these contracts are stakeholders who have got different obligations, who have got different responsibilities, and who can expect certain privileges and benefits as a result of those contracts. Examples of contracts, well, I have given quite a large number over here just for your information. You can see land acquisition, again, depending on the project, if you are building something. Leasing contracts for movable, immovable items, procurement contracts, contracts for hiring labor, operation and maintenance contracts, project financing contracts, insurances, consultancy services, outsourcing, state entities. PPP is public-private partnership mode contracts, where you have public sector entities working with private sector entities, and there are all kinds of different forms. For that, it's becoming quite popular now. A lot of them are taking place in Pakistan also. So for stakeholders, obviously, when the contracts are being made, they would like to formulate the contracts in such a manner that their position is enhanced as much as possible, their risks are kept to a minimum at the expense of the other side. So this is a lot of wrangling usually takes place over contracts, how to word contracts, how to formulate them, how to enforce them, what kind of penalties are there for breach of contracts, and so forth. It's a big subject for project stakeholders. Yeah, this is just some example here about human resources. It's not only about contracts for hiring human resources, but there are many other laws which are relevant for human resources on projects. It's not only contract law, but there are laws relating, for example, to compensation of human resources, to hiring and firing practices, workplace safety and hygiene, gender equality, discrimination and harassment, and social welfare provisions. In many places, in many countries, this is also regulated by various laws. So on a project, you also have to be mindful of these laws, and you have to obey them, because if you don't, then your human resources, your stakeholders, a certain category of stakeholders, they can also take you to task for all that. Many projects which are undertaken in the private sector, of course there are also many laws there which are relevant, like product liability, warranty, certain provisions, intellectual property rights, which is now a big topic all over the world, laws regarding competition. There has to be a certain level of competition, not that you have monopolies, too many monopolies building, or one organization becoming too powerful at the expense of others. Think of the example of Microsoft. Procurement laws, merger and acquisition laws, when organizations are merging or one is acquiring the other, there are also laws relating to that. Privatization laws, joint venture related laws, outsourcing, all of these, there are also laws which have to be adhered to by the stakeholders. It can go on and on. Environmental laws, natural environment, conservation, endangered plant, animal and marine species. I pointed out in one of the previous classes that there are some researchers who also consider plants and animals as stakeholders, and there are actually laws in many countries which protect these animals and plants and trees, etc., from destruction, including the use, including through projects. So, to cut a long story short, I will just go through these. You have all these slides with you, and you can go through them yourselves. We don't have to do all that right now. Some of the illegal acts which project stakeholders are committing on projects And this is, they're quite often, this is why I have decided to include them over here for your information. The use of illicit labor. In many places it's forbidden by law, although laws, in some places they also exist, but they're not being practically enforced. For example, child labor, bonded labor is quite common in Pakistan. Non-documented labor, where you try to avoid, sort of paying benefits and extra benefits and all that, which are entitled to by law. Use of illicit labor. This is something which project stakeholders sometimes do, which they should not be doing. Deception, fraud, bribery, kickbacks, corruption. We read about it every day here in the newspapers, in great graphic detail. Unlawful seizure, damage to property, harassment, intimidation, blackmail. More often than not, unfortunately, it's quite common in projects in many places. Strong arm tactics, physical violence. These are all examples of illegal acts, specifically illegal, which are against laws which are committed by project stakeholders. And project stakeholder management and engagement tells us never to engage in such activities. Pilferage, threats of violence, acts of violence, sabotage, and so forth. Okay, now I will move to another area, another discipline, where there is interfacing between project stakeholder management and the area. And this area is politics, public policy. Politics and public policy. Here you can see a little graph of a politician. And politics, they are inescapable. You have them everywhere. In every country, in every place, in every locality. Projects also have got politics, a lot of politics. Sometimes you have powerful stakeholders who see their project in relation only to their interests, and they behave accordingly. They try to use the projects as a medium of projecting themselves, of drawing attention to themselves, or making themselves more popular, for instance. Sometimes with good intentions, sometimes not with very good intentions. Here in Pakistan, for instance, we often have this phenomena where politicians, they get hold of development funds, and then they sometimes use parts of these funds for work in their constituency in order to boost their profile and their chances of re-election. Sometimes the projects are worthwhile, desirable projects. Sometimes they're not. So there are many different shades over here with regards to politics. When you talk about public administration and stakeholder management, we're talking about the bureaucracy here, as opposed to the politicians. And public administration, it's a very vast field, and you have different levels of administration. You have a administration at the federal or the national level. You have at a regional, state, or provincial level. You have at a district level. You have at a local or municipal level. You have all kinds of entities over here which are involved in administering, and much of this administration work also relates to the administration of projects, in terms of conceiving projects, in terms of identifying needs. For instance, if the roads are becoming clogged due to too much traffic, there is maybe a need to broaden the roads, or there's maybe a need to make an underpass or an overpass or something like that. Well, it's often the public administration which is giving the sort of start or precipitating the project. So, and there are a lot of public administrative entities which are involved in projects. And they have various functions, various roles on project. For example, if you're constructing a new facility, project planners, they would require several permits from local authorities. They have to meet various laws, building laws, various zoning laws, and so forth. And they have to get permission. Can it be done? Can it be done in this way? Can a structure be so big? What kind of requirements does it have to fulfill? Environmental requirements, safety requirements, or hygiene requirements, and so forth. A lot of agencies may be involved, dealing with all kinds of services and facilities, whether it's electricity or water or gas or roads or the environment, and so forth and so forth. And they might also have a number of conditions, and they have their own procedures. And sometimes these procedures can take quite a long time to fulfill, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. And one has to go, one has to meet, one has to convince people why the project should take place, what benefits will it bring for the community, for instance, in addition to the project owners, and so forth. So there is a lot of interfacing taking place between public administration and between project stakeholders. And all kinds of documents. There's one document which I had used when I was at the University of Maryland last year. It's a document for new commercial building construction published by Fairfax County in Virginia. I will see to it that it's also included on your list of or in your set of course materials, so that you can actually have a look at it and see how it is done over there. Well, another discipline which interfaces very closely with project stakeholder management is psychology. Psychology has a lot to do with stakeholders. The terms which I have used, attitudes, behaviors, for instance, these are very important concepts in psychology. How do attitudes form? How do behaviors form? And it is actually the attitudes and behaviors of the stakeholder which determine how they are going to act towards the project, whether they are going to support that project, whether they are going to mildly support it or strongly support it, or whether they are going to mildly oppose it, or whether they are going to vehemently oppose it. All this is determined by their attitudes. Attitudes comes first, and then behavior is based on attitude. Not always, but usually in almost all cases. So attitudes and behaviors and the issues and concerns, expectations and perceptions which influence them, the stakeholders, they have got to be closely studied, assessed, monitored and addressed by project planners and implementers. So this makes it a little bit more complicated, because how do you go and determine stakeholders' attitude towards your project? Of course, there are various ways you can do that, which we'll also look at in subsequent classes, whether it's directly or indirectly. But this is very important. One has to do this, because if you don't do this, then you really don't know what to expect from your stakeholders. You can't really say, how are they going to act towards my project? Are they going to support my project, or are they going to oppose my project? What drives them? What motivates them? What are their concerns? What are their apprehensions? What are their expectations? What are their hopes? One has to know all this, and based on that information, one can then come up with a viable, hopefully an effective strategy in order to manage and engage those stakeholders. If they have concerns, what are their concerns? Maybe they are genuine concerns, or maybe they are not genuine concerns, they are based on misinformation or something, and that can be then addressed, it can be then corrected. In addition to psychology, sociology is also a very important topic when it comes to project stakeholders. Stakeholders are usually human beings like you and me. There might be individuals, there might be groups, there might be associations, or there might be organizations which are also made up of human beings. Sociology has got a major bearing on projects, because all projects are undertaken in a social context. Different localities, different times, can be anywhere, can be any time, but there is always a social context in which this project is taking place. Whether it's a big project or whether it's a very small project, there is always a social context. Now, what is the function of sociology here? Why is it relevant for managing and engaging project stakeholders? Well, what the science of sociology does is it gives us insight, it gives us some idea about the relationships which occur between stakeholders. How do stakeholders interact? What are the modes of interaction? Those of you who have studied sociology, you'll know that there are many different areas over there, you know, sort of group sociology, for instance, which is also very important in terms of stakeholder management, because often projects have to deal with groups of people who have banded together for or against the project, and they have to be managed accordingly. Well, how do these relationships develop? How do they grow? How are they consolidated? How can they be influenced by stakeholders for and against the project? So one has to be cognizant of all these sociological aspects, social networking, for instance, or networking, the intensity of relationships between stakeholders. How intense is it? How strong is it? What are the factors which drive relationships between the stakeholders? These are all factors which are addressed by sociology. Sociology can provide us with some insight in how the stakeholders interact with each other and how the project can use these insights in order to effectively manage and engage the project stakeholders. And of course, you know, sociology is very different depending on where you are, the locality, the way people socialize, the way societies are structured. All these things, they are very location specific, very area specific, and that is why every project, you know, has its own sociological context in which it has to try and manage its stakeholders accordingly. I think we have almost come to the end of this class for today, is it? Yeah, we have indeed. And what I will be looking at in the next class is I'm going to continue with some of the disciplines which I had discussed, which I had mentioned earlier. Where is it? Let me just go back. Yeah, over here. Today we have looked at various disciplines over here. We have looked at communications, we have looked at culture, we have looked at IT, we have looked at international relations, we have looked at law, we have looked at politics or public policy. I didn't say much, but of course, you know, policy has a very big impact on projects, because you know, there are certain policy priorities, there are certain areas where policy tends to focus, and of course when the policy focuses in these areas, then a lot of more projects tend to come up in these areas, and that also is relevant from a stakeholder management point of view. We've looked at public administration, and we've looked at psychology and sociology. What I want to do in the next lecture is I want to focus a lot on the subject of ethics, because whatever action you do in project stakeholder management and engagement, every single action always has to be undertaken on the basis of an ethical foundation. That is very important, and quite a lot can be said about that. I will also be showing you a video. This will be the first video in our series of lectures, and that will be on a mining project in India. And the purpose of this video is really to show you that sometimes there are more important values which have to be taken into consideration when one is doing big projects. It cannot only be about so-called development, but there are also other considerations, other values which are perhaps more important and which should take sometimes precedence over projects. Anyway, what we have done is we have looked at many of these areas today. We have not looked at them in great detail. The reason being is that all of them are, you could say, subjects in themselves. As I said, law, there is a whole course module of project management law. It's not being offered here, to my knowledge, at the virtual university, but it was being offered at the University of Maryland, and I think it's also a core module in their project management program. So that is, for instance, a whole subject module, communications, which I have taught to an undergraduate class there. That was a whole separate module. Culture, it can easily be made into a whole module because it is so big. The same with psychology and sociology. Actually, later on in this course, there will be a lot of references to psychology and to sociology, as you will see. International relations, okay, that is something which really has not been discussed much in the context of project management, although there are so many projects nowadays which are transcending, which are crossing national borders, and which are really very important from a stakeholder perspective, because sometimes what's very good, a project which can be very good from the perspective of some stakeholders, those who are doing that project, the countries who are doing that project, might be considered very negative from the perspective of other stakeholders who might be very powerful and who may be able to do something against the project, like I was giving you the example of the Iran-Pakistan pipeline. And all these other areas too, information technology is a vast field nowadays, which also overlaps with communications. So really you can see it's a very complex network of relationships which exists between the subject of project stakeholder management and all these different areas. And that's a big challenge also for researchers to come up with some very good research to shed some more light on the interfacing which takes place between all these disciplines and project stakeholder management. Anyway, I think that should be enough for today. I hope I have conveyed my point, and see you all in the next lecture. Thank you.